Let's jump into this fun stuff. We're going to learn all about what's in our water and how to get it out. I want to start with a really hot topic, and there's this word or these two words that get thrown around when I talk about it: conspiracy theorists. Let's talk about fluoride. Why is fluoride in our water? Where did it come from? Go ahead and take the floor, my man.
Sure. Well, fluoride is in our water for the most part because the industries for whom fluoride is a toxic waste byproduct needed to find some way to get rid of it in a less costly manner, because if you have something that is actually listed as a toxic waste, and fluoride is, you have to pay toxic waste disposal fees, all sorts of EPA requirements, and gee, I mean, if we could only sell it to municipalities to put it in their water supply instead of having to pay toxic waste fees, wouldn't that be an amazingly fabulous idea? And so a whole bunch of lies were given a long, long time ago. And the people that did those lies, according to the people I've spoken to, the FDA and the EPA, are actually still alive. One of the EPA main people has publicly said the people that made these lies have admitted to him that they were lying about the benefits of fluoride and that they're still alive, and we need an active Congress to be able to change something, or at least a congressional investigation. So basically the reason that it's really in there is because it allows them, with us believing completely incorrectly that it is in some way helping us, as far as reducing cavity rates, although that it doesn't do that, that we therefore should want it there. And the big problem is that if you look at it in the way you should be looking at it, you are being medicated without your consent or approval. If you take a look at chlorine, that's in the water not to directly help you or medicate you. Chlorine is in the water to kill bugs. It's in the water to kill bacteria, fungi, viruses, and to make the water cleaner, and we can talk about that later. But it's in there to help make the water safe. Okay, whether we like it or we don't like it, it's in there for a legitimate type of reason. Whereas fluoride is in the water not in any way to treat the water. Fluoride is in the water to treat the people drinking the water. So that's called a medication. And it's in there without anybody having been given the prescription that says that you want that medication. And that's called uninformed consent.
Mm-hmm. And it's really unfortunate that that's going on, or unfortunate. Now, the two industries that you were talking about were the aluminum and the fertilizer industries, correct?
That's correct, yeah. For a long, long time, all of the fluoride was coming in from the aluminum refining industry, and for the scrubbers on their stacks, it would be pulling out the fluoride, which they then had to pay toxic waste disposal fees for. Now it's mostly coming from the fertilizer industry. But it really doesn't matter where it comes from. Either way, it isn't a laboratory-grade chemical. A lot of people think that, well, they're taking this purified product that you might get at a lab supply house called sodium fluoride, and they're adding it to the water supply. Very few municipalities around the country are getting that. Almost all of them are getting the toxic waste byproduct of the industry, and therefore not only does it have fluoride in it, which is very good for you to take if you want to increase your hip fracture and cancer rates. Most people don't really want to do that. So it's very good for that. But it's also good for other things, because since it is a toxic waste byproduct, since it exists with lead and other toxic chemicals around it, and since it's actually been shown to help our absorption of those, and I don't want to call them nutrients, we'll call them poisons, I guess, you're not only getting the fluoride you don't want, but you're also getting lead and other toxins, and it's helping them get into your body while, of course, doing its own damage.
Of course, we're consuming tons of this. I mean, a lot of us are. Has it ever been approved for consumption?
It has been approved for a use as a rodenticide, so to kill rodents like rats, and as a pesticide. You can actually still get in the U.S. both rodenticide and pesticide products which are using fluoride as the poison. It doesn't really have an actual approval for anything else. It's just sort of allowed to be there because, well, everybody knows that if you put it in the water it's going to help. Wrong. And everybody knows if you put it in your toothpaste it's going to help. Wrong. And so they've just sort of hands off and left it alone and not bothered with it. And the end result is we get poisoned every day.
I was listening to your class today, and you talked about a study where they compared a couple of close, like cities that are really close together or something like that, and one was fluoridated and one wasn't. Can you tell us about the results of that?
That was one of my favorite studies because very often research is done very poorly, and sometimes on purpose and sometimes by accident. In this case, they did a very, very good job. They took a couple of cities that were very close to one another, so we're in the same state, I believe it was Vermont, and they had two different reservoirs. So it was very simple for them to simply fluoridate the water supply of one city, not fluoridate the water supply of the other city, and see what would happen over a period of time long enough to determine whether it was changing in any way, and we call them cavities, but in dentistry they're called caries, whether it changed the carie rate. And so they did this, and surprisingly, or not surprisingly, there wasn't any difference between the two cities whatsoever. However, for some unknown reason, and nobody ever was able to determine what the reason was, for some unknown reason, the carie rate in both cities went down a little bit during this study. It went down enough to be statistically significant, is the way it's said in research. And when that happens, they would like to know what the reason was, and they looked, and they couldn't find one. They were looking to see whether maybe people were taking water from one city to the other, or whether things made in one city out of water were being sold in the other. They couldn't figure out any reason. So whatever the reason was that the carie rate went down equally in both cities, it had nothing whatsoever to do with the water supply, because if it did, it would have been different in the two cities, because one was fluoridated and one was not. However, because of politics, and because of we the people getting lied to every time the politicians open their mouths, or at least close to it, what they did was, because they wanted to promote fluoridation, what they announced in the newspaper and the radio and to the public was that when they took a look at all of the statistics, what they found was that the people in the city which had the fluoridated water had a statistically significant reduction in their cavity rate. Well, yeah, but so did the other city with the exact same decrease. So talk about lying while you're telling the truth. Oh, my God.
Wow, that's amazing right there. We have something called the Environmental Protection Agency, and I would think that they would be there to protect the environment as well as us. What do they think about that? I think there was something about the EPA union that came out.
Yes, the entire union of EPA, and that includes their scientists, their attorneys, and of course all the other various people that work there. So the entire union at the EPA has come out publicly numerous times. They've actually flown around the United States to different states to make presentations. One of them was in San Diego. They have come out completely against the addition of fluoride to any municipal water supply because it simply has never been shown to be helpful. It has been shown to be harmful, and they were very upset. William Hersey, one of the head people in the EPA, I'm not sure if he's still in the same position or not, said that it was really interesting that the government had to go to scientists outside of EPA headquarters to be able to get them to say things about the benefits of fluoride, because the EPA actually looked at the research and said, we can't say that. Those benefits aren't there. We'd be lying. So the EPA is completely against the use of any kind of fluoridated water for anybody to be consuming in the United States. And here we are. They are the agency that's supposed to be there to protect us, but they are not allowed to just say, and therefore you're not going to do it, because the government has control and puppet strings over the EPA.
I think you mentioned hip fractures earlier. What else has been found with the studies on fluoride?
Hip fractures was a big one. The longer people were in the fluoridated areas, the more likely they were to have hip fractures as they got older. A major difference as far as the unfluoridated areas, where it was way, way, way less. And there are quite a few different types of cancers. There's all sorts of different issues having to do with our emotions. They found that fluoride causes hyperactivity and hypoactivity, depending on whether we're talking about the people exposed to it or they're young. So a lot of the problems that we all have today, they certainly have multiple causes. Anytime somebody says this causes that, unless it's a bullet in the head. Okay, the person died, they got a bullet in the head. I will accept the bullet in the head caused their death. But for most other things, it's one of a number of things, so I would absolutely not say it's the only one, but it is definitely something which we know for a fact is a carcinogenic agent. It's a cancer-causing agent. It's listed as being such. It's an extremely potent halogen. It's very, very, very strong. For example, most of your listeners understand the word acid. They might not be able to explain it in a biochemical manner, but you know that there's acid in a car battery, sulfuric acid, that our body produces hydrochloric acid. And if you make that acid strong enough, it can do a lot of damage to a lot of different body parts, and it can, eat up different substances. It could burn you, or even when during the Prohibition, people would splash either alkaline or acid substances in people's eyes to blind them. Well, there's really only one substance out there which we consider to be so inert that things just don't hurt it, and that substance is glass. And that's the reason that the best possible container that you can hold something in is glass, because the glass simply doesn't interact in any way with your substance, and nothing's coming out of the glass and going in and hurting your food. Well, as inert as glass is, if you put a fluoride-containing acid in it, which is fluorosilicic acid, or an acid that fluoride is the active ingredient in it, it starts to eat the glass away.
Whoa, are you serious?
Yeah, so that's one of the very, very few hydrofluoric acid. Hydrofluoric acid must be stored in plastic, and it's the only acid that cannot be stored in glass because it will eat up the glass. It's used to etch glass.
Wow, and that's what we drink. That's crazy. Can it get into our brains?
I don't think there's any place that it can't get. When you have something as active as that, people talk about this, and it's not there like you see a roadblock that you come up to and there are police there in front of you. It's not like a roadblock. It's not actually physical, but there's this idea that has been set forth that we have a blood-brain barrier. However, mercury and possibly fluoride can perforate the blood-brain barrier, and therefore things get in that shouldn't anyway. So I don't know if there's anything that isn't going to be able to get in there.
Interesting. Have you seen these waters for babies that have fluoride in them?
Oh yeah, yep. That should be totally illegal. We're putting fluoride in kids' mouths. We're putting fluoride in little tablets and in the drops that are given for, let's say, nutrients, a little multivitamin for a child. What are we trying to do? We're trying to make sure that they get cancer because we need the money for the physicians. I mean, obviously that's not what's going on, but that's what it sometimes feels like.
Yeah, most definitely. Toothpaste. I'm sure somebody's curious about toothpaste right now. Are there any specific ones that...
Well, toothpaste is actually fascinating because so many people have been badly harmed, including death, from inadvertently consuming toothpaste, mostly young children, because the amount of a poison that will harm us is dependent on the strength of the poison, the quantity of the poison, and the body weight of the individual that's being poisoned. The smaller our body weight, the more damaging the same amount of poison is. So it turns out that when a child is brushing their teeth, or in many cases having their teeth brushed for them by their parents, that they would swallow enough that they'd start having convulsions, people would be calling poison control, and for a number of years, the largest number of poison control calls were based on problems having to do with the swallowing of toothpaste. So because of that, and some deaths, at least one that I know of, they mandated, and we're talking about like 1995, 15 years ago, that all fluoride-containing toothpaste, which of course is 95% of them or more, have a warning label. So all your listeners should go take a look at your toothpaste. If it has fluoride in it, take a look at the box that it came in and read the warning label. There are only a couple ways they're allowed to phrase it. And it has to say on there that if more than the amount used for brushing, or sometimes more than a pea-sized serving, is swallowed, call poison control immediately. And people were never told that this was put on there. So I remember when the law went into effect, the regulation, and yet I watched the news that night, and the next night, and the next night. I looked in the newspaper, I listened to the radio, and I guess that the big guys who want us to be getting rid of their toxic waste had enough power to not make that public. So we've got millions of people all over the U.S. that don't even know. I mean, it happens in my class every semester. They go home and take a look at their Colgate, and there's various Crest and everything, all the different ones. I don't want to target one. They're all the same. And they come back into class next week and go, oh, my God, I didn't even know that little box with a warning label was on there. And so, your question was, do we have a couple of good ones? There are a number of good ones in the health food store. The brands that are easiest to find would be Xyla White, which comes in a couple of flavors. That's made by Now Foods, or NOW. That's a really good one and quite reasonably priced because they don't mark their stuff up a lot, so you get a big tube for like $7-8. Another one would be Weleda, WELEEDA. That's made in Germany. And a third one is Pilu, P as in Paul, EELU. Each of these have a number of different flavors. You can pick the ones you like best. I've had a number of people that tell me they like the flavor and taste best of the NOW, either in cinnamon or mint flavor. But those are some really good ones. And if you have access to some of the ones that we incorrectly call prescription toothpaste, because you don't need a prescription for them, you can find them on the web. But really, really good quality ones, like loaded with herbs that support your gum health and that kill bacteria.